Hello and welcome to the Calalam Cymru revision sessions. Today we're going to be outlining the programme of sessions for GCSE biology and then I will begin those sessions by doing the first topic to be covered, which will be plant and animal cells. So here's the plan over the next few recordings. So the planned sessions today, like I said, I'll be looking at this first section on plant and animal cells. Then the next recorded session will be on the heart and circulation, and that will be covered by Miss Abigail Kavanagh from Connah's High School. Session 3 will be on plants and photosynthesis, and finally the last recorded session will be on cell transport, and I will be delivering that, and it really carries on from what I covered today with plant and animal cells. So without further ado, let's look at the outline of what I've got in store for us today. So first thing we're going to do is look at the structure of plant and animal cells. That is something which I would imagine you've covered before in year 7 and 8 and 9. And I imagine also you might well have looked at the function of those different parts of the plant and animal cell too. We're going to look at the function of differentiated cells or specialized cells, talk about what specialization means and why it's important. And then we're going to look at the different levels of organization that occurs within organisms, the hierarchy that exists within an organism. Throughout this session, I intend to try and give you the opportunity to practice, to recall information that we've covered, because the more that you can become involved with this session, the more likely it is that it will stay with you and you'll be able to recall it in the future. Okay, so let's kick things off by looking at animal cells. So I hope that most of what you see on here you've seen before. So perhaps the most obvious thing to identify is the nucleus. The way this diagram is shown actually implies that the nucleus is composed of just a dark blob inside a bigger blob. In actual fact, what you're looking for is just one dark blob that stains darker, and therefore that's why it always appears darker than anything else. So we have a nucleus which stands out alone and will be unique in the nucleus. It will be obvious because there's only one of them. And then we have the cytoplasm, which is like a jelly-like substance within which the reactions take place. We have the cell membrane, the outer layer of the cell, which controls what comes in and out of the cell. And we have these things on here, which you might not have covered before, these things called mitochondria. And the mitochondria, worth practicing the name. I always encourage whenever you're learning something new, not just to look at it, look at the word, but actually to say the word too. So mitochondria. And those are the sites of respiration. We'll have a look at that shortly. So I said I'd make things interactive. So let's see. I wonder if I could give you a moment and you can always pause this recording and see if you can recall what those key features are within the cell. So hopefully you've paused and you've now returned and you've had a go. So number 1 was the nucleus. Number 2 was the cell membrane. Number 3, the cytoplasm. And 4, probably the trickier one now, is the mitochondria. Okay, the mitochondria. So let's have a look at the functions of those. So we say the nucleus controls the cell's activities. Now the nucleus contains DNA, and it's through DNA that the nucleus is able to control the cell's activities. Now later on in the GCSE course, we look at DNA, the role of DNA, how DNA goes about controlling these cells' activities. But for now, we leave it quite vague and say the nucleus is responsible for just controlling the cell's activities. The cell membrane is responsible for controlling what comes in and out of the cell. So we think of the cell membrane, often think of it as being a bit like the skin of a balloon, but it's far more complex than that. There's far more going on in there, and it's got it needs to have more going on because it's got to determine what can be allowed into or out of the cell. Then there's the cytoplasm, and I've described it earlier as being sort of a jelly-like substance, and it's the same sort of thing that I'd say that it is often when we look at animal cells, we seem rather boring. But there's a huge amount going on inside the cytoplasm. There's lots of reactions taking place, and so it's very often that we think of it as just being a cell as being very static, but actually it's a very dynamic thing, the cell. There's so much going on. It's so busy. It's more like a busy city than with lots happening, lots of traffic moving around. Then it would be sort of like in the rural countryside where there's not much going on, but there's lots going on inside a cell. And the mitochondria then is where respiration takes place. Now, respiration, I hope, is a word you're familiar with, and you would have covered before many times down the school. But there I'm telling you what it is. It's the release of energy from food. These are the powerhouses of the cell. These are the parts of the cell which are responsible for taking the glucose from food and extracting or releasing the energy from that glucose. That energy can then be used by the cell. Okay, right. Let's see if we can do the same thing again. I suggest you pause the video and see which of these words you can remember. Okay, so again, I hope you've been able to have a go at those. You've paused the video and now you're back. So the nucleus, remember, it controls the cell's activities, is what we expected there. The cell membrane controls what comes in and out of the cell. The cytoplasm is all about where chemical reactions take place. And the mitochondria is where respiration takes place. And I said that respiration is the release of energy from food. So that's animal cells. Let's have a look at plant cells. Straight away, another opportunity. We've got the same features that we've already seen. We can see in these cells. Can you identify what they are? Pause the video, have a go, and then come back. Right, okay. So number one is the cell membrane. Number two is the cytoplasm. Number three was the mitochondria. And number four on there is the nucleus. And I mentioned earlier in the animal cell that nucleus in the animal cell looks like, the way it was drawn earlier was, it looks like a blob inside a blob. This is more of a better representation. We just see a single distinct feature, often large, and all looks uniform with inside it. Okay, I'll just go back a moment. So what extra features do we see here then on the plant cell? Well, we've got the vacuole. So the vacuole is this really large cavity, if you want to call that, but it's filled with cell sap. So it's filled with a liquid, it's filled with cell sap, takes up a huge amount of the plant cell, and it's a permanent feature. Then we have chloroplasts. Well, chloroplasts are all about photosynthesis, so we're going to see lots of those inside plant cells. So you can see numerous chloroplasts in there. And then we have a cell wall. So we've got three additional features inside a plant cell. Okay, so worth noting that both plant and animal cells, we see the same things each time. We see the nucleus, we see the cell membrane, we see cytoplasm, we see mitochondria. In plant cells, we also see three additional features. We see the vacuole, we see chloroplast, we see the cell wall. Cell wall is there. It's all about giving support. So it's the outer layer of the cell. It's a thick layer and provides structure and support to the cell. Same thing. Pause the video. See which of those you can remember. Okay, so number one, those are the chloroplasts. Number two, the cell wall. And number three, the permanent vacuole. Let's have a look at the functions of those things. So the cell wall is all about strengthening or supporting the cell. Importantly, we say it's made of cellulose. It's made of cellulose. Cellulose provides that structural support that's needed for the cell wall to do its job of strengthening the cell. The chloroplast, I mentioned, the site of photosynthesis. So inside the chloroplast, we find this molecule, or lots, hundreds, thousands, millions of these molecules called chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is a molecule which absorbs light, and it's that light which is used for photosynthesis. And finally, the vacuole I mentioned stores cell sap. Same idea. What can you remember from what we've just said? Pause the video, see which words you can recall. Okay, hopefully you're back. So we've got number one is cellulose. Remember that cell wall is made of this substance, this molecule called cellulose. Chloroplasts is the site of photosynthesis, and they contain this molecule called chlorophyll. And the vacuole is responsible for storing cell sap. Okay, there's quite a lot of information there. If you were coming at that for the first time, that's tricky because there's lots of information, but hopefully you've come up that, you've heard it, your teachers taught you before, even in year 10, and you would have covered those things possibly in year 7, 8, and 9. So hopefully that's something you're familiar with. So I wonder if you could have a go at this activity now. So if you look at the functions that are on there, are you able to identify what each of these, which structure belongs to which function? So we've got a site of respiration. We've got chemical reactions occur. The feature which strengthens or supports the cell. The feature which stores cell sap. Which feature controls the activities of the cell, which is the site of photosynthesis, and which feature controls what comes in and out of the cell. Now, you can pause the video and see which ones you can recall. Now, if that was a struggle, maybe it would be easier if I added these names on to allow you to match things up. So that should be okay. So what goes with what? You should be able to, hopefully you can see now differently. You can see our site of respiration matches up with the mitochondria. The chemical reactions occur inside the cytoplasm. It's the cell wall which strengthens or supports the cell. The vacuole is what stores the cell sap. The nucleus controls the cell's activities. It's a chloroplast, which is the site of photosynthesis. And it's the cell membrane which controls what comes in and out of the cell. So if I take it back a level, asking you to, I did say I try to involve you as much as possible and allow you to sort of engage with this process of this learning process. So this level here, where I give you the function and you're asked to identify the structure, if you can do that without the hints, without the names themselves, great. Or if you need those names, okay, that's a starting point, but you're looking towards being able to recall those names without having, or record the names and match them with the function without having the names given to you. Also, though, consider this. What if you were given those names and you were asked to identify the function that goes with them? All of those things will be required of you at GCSE level. Having to identify the function is going to be more tricky, but still it's at a level that you should be aiming to achieve. And usually these are questions which appear, will virtually always appear in foundation paper and can appear in higher tier paper as well. But they're generally regarded more as foundation questions rather than higher tier questions. We also need to identify what goes where. So whether they're in plant and animal cells. So you can see I've listed all those different parts of the different parts of the cell, put them in the animal cell and the plant cell. I've also included on here ribosomes. Okay, now ribosomes are something that sometimes you hear about. They'll be higher tier really, but ribosomes are the site of protein synthesis. And so here I've just again added on those different functions, what goes with what. You can see I've got 4 pointing here towards the animal cell, but all those 4, the nucleus, the cytoplasm, the cell membrane, and the mitochondria, they appear in both plant and animal cell. It's these 3 in green, which are plant cell only. The ribosomes do appear in both, but I think it's unlikely you'd be asked about ribosomes. Okay, here's a task for you. So on here is a load of errors. So I've put together some information that we've just covered, and there's loads of errors on there. I'd like you to see if you can pause the video, identify the errors, and see if you can say what should be there instead. Well, I hope you've had a chance to do that now. You've been able to pause the video and you've looked at what words were wrong here. So let's have a look at what we should have. So the first thing, list out all cells in plants and animals have certain features in common. They all have ectoplasm. So ectoplasm does not exist. It is cytoplasm that should be in there. A sort of living jelly where most of the chemical reactions that make up life go on. And then the ectoplasm is done again. So, okay, it's the same error really. Is always surrounded by a cell wall, but it's not always surrounded by a cell wall. It's always surrounded by a cell membrane, and it's the cell membrane which controls what enters and leaves the cell. Then we said we have a nucleus surrounded by DNA. Well, the DNA does not surround the nucleus. The DNA is within the nucleus. So you said that we could say that you have a nucleus containing DNA, the chemical which controls the cell's activities. And they also have mitochondria, the singular, just one mitochondria is called a mitochondrion. Nothing to concern yourself with though, which are the structures that carry out aerobic respiration, supplying cells with glucose. They're not supplying the cells with glucose, they're using glucose to supply the cells with energy. Then we've got plant cells can be distinguished from animal cells because they have some features that are not seen in animal cells. These are, they have a cell wall made of cellulose, which surrounds all animal cells, but it should be all plant cells. A large permanent central vacuole, which is a space filled with water. It's not filled with water, it's filled with cell sap. Chloroplasts, which absorb the light needed, absorbs the light plants need to make their food by respiration. They don't make food by respiration, they make it by photosynthesis. It says chloroplasts are not found in all plant cells, but they are always found in animal cells. No, they are never found in animal cells. It's true that chloroplasts are not all found in all plant cells. For example, cells of the root wouldn't have any chloroplasts because when they're underground, there's no photosynthesis they could carry out, so there's no point in them having chloroplasts. But in any cells, the vast majority of cells above the ground, the cells will have chloroplasts. Okay, let's have a look at some questions that you could be asked. So again, you can pause the video and see which of these, if you can have a go at these and see how you get on. Okay, so this is quite a low level activity because it's giving you the words to fill in. It's giving you a very simple diagram of a cell. It tells you it's an animal cell as well. So by telling us it's an animal cell suggests that we're definitely not going to see chloroplast, we're not going to see cell wall, we're not going to see a vacuole. Important to read the information given. They tell you it's an animal cell, so switch on to that. Very often students don't read the question fully and miss some key information. On a question like this, which would be a foundation to your question 1 or 2, and the sort of marks that you really want to be bagging, you really need to make sure you don't make those mistakes. Okay, so just be careful with them. So what do we have here? A is the cell membrane, B is the nucleus, and C then is the cytoplasm. And then it says from the list, name 2 structures which are only found in plant cells. Well, there's 3 to choose from: the chloroplast, the vacuole, or the cell wall. Okay. What about this one? It says this student is examining plant cells. So we switch on to plant cells now. This shows the student's labeling or student's label diagram of one of the plant cells. And there it is. And it says complete each of the following sentences. So again, pause the video and see how you get on. Okay, so the cell wall is made of cellulose. Okay, so that's going to need some recall on your part. It's not just a case of identifying things. The function of the cell wall is, you can say, to strengthen or to support the cell. The chloroplasts contain chlorophyll, which is needed then for photosynthesis. And the vacuole contains cell sap, which is mostly water. Now, this implies it's question 2. Well, it says question 2 on there. This is a little bit more challenging because it's not a case of just identifying. This is, you have to know what those structures are. The fact that it's a fill in the blanks question makes things a little bit easier, but still you've got to know those terms, and all those terms on there from cellulose. I don't know whether I'd say this in for strengthen, but chlorophyll, photosynthesis, and cell sap, they are all biological terms. Okay, they're all biological terms. So it's tricky to recall those things in order to answer those. Okay, here we go again. So now this is going up a level again, shows an animal cell. So we're switching on to animal cell. Name each labeled part and give its function. Now you'll notice there's a few other bits on here on the animal cell. We've got these dots, lots of these dots here, and it's not a very good drawing really. And I think really the idea is that it's asking you to stick to the essentials, really, of look, what do we know? What are you required to know? Remember that the parts of the cell that I've outlined are part of a contract, really, between you and the exam board. The exam board can ask you anything on the specification, and you can expect to get credit for anything on the specification, and you can't expect to get credit if you were to give information which is not on the specification. So knowing that, thinking about what features of the cell I've gone over with you today, we know that we should be referring to those now. So we shouldn't be referring to something else you might have read elsewhere on some book that you were reading that's not a WJC linked book. You may well be saying useful, or you may well be saying factually correct information. But remember the contract. You need to know what's in the specification, those things I've outlined today. So what should we have here? So this is quite a lot of recall here, because you've got to get the name. Okay, so A is the cytoplasm, and then you've got to recall the function as well. And this we can just reel off. It's where chemical reactions take place. B is the cell membrane, and the function of the cell membrane controls what comes in and out of the cell. We've seen that before. And C is the nucleus, which controls the cell's activities. You might mention things like it contains DNA. That would, whatever you're answering questions, you're always, I call it going fishing for marks. So you never know what's going to be on the mark scheme. So you give as much information as you can to try and give yourself the chance of getting the marks. So when I complete a past paper question, or when I was to do, if I was to do a past paper, there's a good chance I would not get all the marks, because sometimes what the question is asking for is a little bit obscure, or just you don't think along those lines. And you go down a different path when you're answering, and that's absolutely normal. But what we know is that if we know our stuff and we know our information and we give lots of information, we're giving ourselves the best chance to pick up the marks. So it's possible on this mark scheme that that function of the nucleus was going to insist on you saying that it contains DNA. Well, if you know it contains DNA, you need to write those things down, because that will give you the best chance of getting those marks. And what that means is you need to know your stuff well. Okay, you need to know your stuff well. And this is a similar question here. This plant cell also contains chloroplast, a cell wall, and a vacuole. Label each of these parts on the diagram. Actually, with this one here, you can see that the labels are already on there. So I think in a real exam, they'd have to take that away, wouldn't they? But actually, it does say give the function only. So it's all right, actually. They just say give the function. So it does say label each, but actually the question really is only giving the function. So chloroplast function. So photosynthesis. I mean, if you were to put down photosynthesis, that's a real gamble. I think it would be okay. Particularly, there's only 3 marks. So they're not asking for an awful lot. They're asking for 1 mark each. But you could say it contains chlorophyll, which absorbs light for photosynthesis. And that would be a better answer and make it very unlikely you wouldn't get the marks. The cell wall function strengthens or supports the cell. Again, you could say that it contains cellulose, or it's a cell wall made of cellulose, and that's what confers that strength to the cell. And the vacuole function, I don't think there's much more you can say about that. It stores cell sap. So hopefully you've had a chance to have a go at these. You pause the video, had a go at the questions, and then you can check against the answers that I've given. Okay, so this is where we are. I said we're going to look at the structure of plant and animal cells. We've done that, and the function of the different parts of plant and animal cells, and I think we've covered that as well. So let's now look at what else we're going to cover. They explain the function of differentiated cells and identify levels of organization within organisms. So let's first of all have a look at what we mean by specialized cells. So cells, when we draw a basic animal cell, they all look the same and they all look rather boring. And as I alluded to earlier, they look very static. But actually, there's very few cells which actually look like that generic cell that we often draw as teachers, because cells undergo this process called differentiation. It's another word where I would encourage you to use, to say out loud, just so you get used to it. That process, differentiation. Check the spelling and consider how you might be able to recall that in an exam. So it's called differentiation in order to become specialized to do a particular job. So all cells in your body largely are specialized to do a particular job. So I'll give you an example. So we have things like liver cells, which are specialized to carry out the function of the liver, and heart cells and sperm cells, which look very different, and nerve cells, which are incredibly long, and they look very different. So each cell has become specialized to do a particular job. And then when you take those specialized cells, and we get a group of them together to carry out a similar function, we call that a tissue. So here we're looking at levels of organization. And when we get two or more tissues that together perform a particular function, we refer to that as an organ. If we go further and look at a group of organs that work together, we refer to it as an organ system. And then we have all of the organ systems that work together to form a whole animal or plant, and that is known as an organism. So you can see here I've got my, I've drawn a generic cell here. And then when you get lots of those cells, I say specialized cells working together, they form a tissue. And lots of tissues that work together to form an organ. Organs work together to form an organ system, and together they form an organism. So in the case of the digestive system, which is shown here, so you've got a cell, it could be, for example, it could be like a specialized muscle cell. So lots of muscle cells work together to form muscle tissue. And that muscle tissue you would find in the walls of the stomach, which is the organ that's shown here. And then you have all these other organs, the liver, the gallbladder, you've got the small and the large intestine, the pancreas. Those are different organs which work together or combine together and work together to form an organ system, which in this case is the digestive system. And then we got lots of systems in our body, from digestive system, circulatory system, the nervous system, the renal system with the kidneys, lots of systems within our body that work together then to form an organism. So that hierarchy is important. Cells work together to form tissues, work together to form organs, work together to form organisms. Sorry, did I miss one out? I think organs to organ systems to organisms. And the important thing there is that it is to emphasize the function, that a group of specialized cells with similar function is called a tissue. That's similar function. And then a group of tissues which work together to form a specific function is called an organ. And the same with the organs that work together to form a function is called an organ system, and so on. So that term function is useful. Okay, same thing as we asked you earlier. If you can pause the video and then see which of these words you can recall. Right, okay, so number one, right at the heart of it, we've got the cells. And I think it'd be quite useful to refer to those as specialized cells too, because they will be specialized to do a particular job, and those cells will work together to form number two, which was tissues. And then a group of tissues work together to form or to function as an organ. A group of organisms work together to function as an organ system, like a digestive system. And a group of organ systems work together to form an organism. Okay, important hierarchy. It is asked about quite a lot. Let's try this again. So I've changed the way in which this information is presented. So which of these numbers can you recall here? Pause the video, write them down, and then we'll check. Right. Okay, so we've got cells undergo a process called, this is the one that is a tricky one, is differentiation. Okay, to become different from each other, differentiation, in order to become specialized to do a particular job. So often those two words are interchangeable. So we say, what process are those cells going through? We can call it differentiation, or we can call it specialization. But if you're asked to say what differentiation is, I think you need to use that word when cells become specialized to do a particular job. And then group of specialized cells with a similar function, that's number two, is called a tissue, number three. A group of two or more tissues that perform a specific function, there it is again, is called an organ, number five. A group of organs that work together is called an organ system. And then all of the organ systems work together from a whole work together from a whole animal or plant, and that's known as an organism. Okay, so all of the organisms work together, they form a whole animal or plant, which is known as an organ system. Right, okay, have a look at this question on here. Pause the video, give yourself a chance to answer it. Particularly the second part of that, part B, the focus is more on specialization and differentiation of cells. Okay, so we've got a group of muscle cells from the wall of the intestines. So we are actually in the digestive system. And asks you to use the words in the box to name the structures labeled A, B, and C. Should be straightforward. It's quite nice. It's quite your standard animal cell. They've labeled mitochondria for you. So they're taking that out of the equation. So for A, we should have had the nucleus. Remember, it's that unique feature in each cell. B is the cell membrane, and C is the cytoplasm. And the reason then they've identified the mitochondria for you is because of the next question. It says, how are these muscles adapted to release a lot of energy? So what's the job here? This is usually the first stumbling block when you're covering this topic in class. Often it's this question which causes the problem, because you're having to apply the information that you know already. So what do we know here? We know that these cells contain mitochondria, and we can see there's an awful lot of mitochondria on there. We need to know what mitochondria do, and our link here is that they told us about a lot of energy. Well, where's energy relevant? Energy is relevant because mitochondria carry out respiration, which is the release of energy. So we need to now link those ideas to put that into a structured answer. So the key things we need to appreciate here is that inside that cell there are lots of mitochondria, and mitochondria are where respiration takes place. And we then linked those features of the muscle cells, mitochondria, with the release of a lot of energy, which is where respiration takes place. You might say where respiration takes place and respiration is the release of energy, but that last, and I think I would put that down because it just ties that answer together, because it links back into the question, because it asks about a lot of energy on there. Another question here, which got two specialized cells. So again, I'll give you an opportunity to have a go at this. So you can pause the video and we'll see how we get on. Right, okay, so now we're at a plant cell and an animal cell, and we're looking at two specialized cells here. So one from the plant, one from the animal, and I asked you to label plants A and B. So part A there is going to be the cell wall. The temptation is often to label the cell membrane, or to try and decide whether you should be labeling the cell membrane or the cell wall. So whenever you're asked to label the, whenever you're asked to identify which is which, it's one of the few occasions, the cell membrane is one of the few occasions where you label the edge, or you label a line. The norm, when you label, that label line should finish within the structure. That's exactly the case that's been with the vacuole. So you can see the vacuole, the label line ends within the vacuole. It doesn't label the edge of the vacuole, it labels the inside the vacuole. Same thing has been done here with B. So B is the cytoplasm, and you can see that B, the end of that label line, is within the cytoplasm. It's not the edge of the cytoplasm. And they've done that job on A, on the cell wall. That label line, it's not particularly easy to see, but is right in the middle of that cell wall. I mean, I don't think they could ask you to label the cell membrane here, because you'd need a bigger diagram and it being very clear that the line they want you to label is on the inside of that cell wall, okay, that inner line of the cell wall. So the question is actually quite rarely asked. And give the function of the tail of this animal cell. So this is a sperm cell now. So you can see how we've moved away from that generic cell that we started with for both plant and animal cells. So if I just look at the plant cell to begin with, you can see this protrusion here, this thing sticking out from the plant cell is very different to what we saw in that first plant cell. And that's because this plant cell is specialized. This is a cell from a root. It's called a root hair cell. And the whole idea of this protrusion here is to increase the surface area. The roots are all about absorbing water and minerals. So by having those protrusions, those things sticking out into the soil, you're increasing the surface area for molecules to be absorbed across the cell membrane. Okay, they'll go through the cell wall, but they have to get across the cell membrane into the plant cell. The sperm cell is specialized because, yes, it would still have your standard stuff. The next question is to ask you to draw and label the nucleus, but it would still have the standard stuff, cell membrane, cytoplasm, and a nucleus. But what's marked out as being very different here is that you've got a tail on it. So the tail is all about swimming. And that's all you need to say, really. The tail is there to swim or to propel that sperm forward so it can travel through the female reproductive system, and hopefully its intention is to fuse with an egg cell. Okay, so it needs to be able to swim to do that. There's only one mark, so we know we don't need to say a great deal, but actually saying to swim in order to fertilize an egg would be a better answer on there. And then it says on the animal, draw and label the nucleus. So you needed to put, if I call it a blob, I'm not really doing it credit, but you need to show a structure similar to the one that's shown in the plant cell there. The only other feature that you see in the sperm cell, which is really common in the sperm cell, already abundant in the sperm cell, is a mitochondria, and you see lots of mitochondria in sperm cells. And I hope that might be obvious to you as to why that would be. There's a lot of energy needed for that sperm to travel, to swim, and therefore it's going to need a lot of mitochondria to provide that energy via respiration. Okay, I'm just going to run through with you what I'm going to cover with you in the last session, session 4. So this is all about, it's going to be all about cell and cell transport. So I hope I can stop now with the plant cells and animal cells, and it gives you a good idea of the key features that you need to know about, and the functions, and that level of organization, and the specialization that we see, and you get an idea of the questions that's required, you're required to answer. I hope also that you've managed to been able to pause the video and do some of these activities yourselves just to reinforce your learning. Okay. Next session I will be doing with you will be on diffusion and active transport. Okay, so I'm just going to run through what it is we will cover. So we're going to look at the process of diffusion itself, the role of the cell membrane in diffusion, and then we're also going to look at active transport afterwards. I also intend to cover osmosis with you too. Osmosis is probably the more tricky one. There's a lot to learn with osmosis. There's a definition that's utterly essential with osmosis, but that will be what we will cover in the next session with me. But that is session 4. If I go back to the plan of attack for these sessions, so we've covered plant and animal cells. Next session that it will be available will be on the heart and circulation with Miss Abigail Kavanagh. And then she will also be doing the plant cell photosynthesis session 2. That'll be session 3. And then that final session, recorded session, will be me covering cell transport. I mentioned diffusion, active transport, and also we'll be looking at osmosis as well. Hope you found the session useful. I hope you can catch all the other sessions too, and make good use of these recorded sessions.